Welcome to the MMA Vivisection. I am your host, Zane Simon, with my fellow inmate, the background character in many a prison gym scene, Connor Rebush.
I'm here as part of SB Nation's Scared Straight initiative. They want this MMA business to go away, so I'm supposed to scare you into liking good old-fashioned combat sports like boxing and taekwondo.
Oh, I thought you were here to like scare me off my bad habits. So I'm
SB Nation isn't really concerned with that. They just want I'm supposed to tell you about how MMA has impacted my life and how it got me into the position I'm in today, and how if I'd been a boxer, I would have been much better off. So, it's MMA is bad for you is the point. But we'll get to that over the course of today's seminar. Hope you guys are in for 3 hours of me telling horrifying stories of my past while dressed in this scuzzy wife beater.
All right. On that note, what we're really here to do is we are really here to talk about UFC on Fox, Holm versus Shevchenko, and a fight card that I'm not going to try and convince anyone that this is like a secretly awesome fight card that they need to be hyped for. And if you're a casual fan, like tune in, you're going to see some awesome shit. But I'm really excited about this card.
Are you?
I am.
I can't bring myself to be excited, and I'm not really sure why. There are a few matchups that I think are really solid, and then a lot of others that, for whatever reason, just don't do it for me, including the main event. But we can get to that when we get to that.
The main event could be a major stinker. I'm not trying to deny that.
I think it'll almost certainly be the slowest fight on the card.
But the thing is that's the thing, is that underneath that, like, I see a lot of fights. The only other fight that I'm really worried about sucking, just like being bad, is Michel Prazeres versus JC Cottrell.
Yeah.
Because that's two dudes who depend on a power wrestling to grappling game and are really mediocre kickboxers and could easily get stuck in a no takedowns mediocre kickboxing battle.
Yeah, I can definitely see that happening.
Everybody else, like, the fights may not be the most technical thing in the world. There may be some ugly shit going on. There may be some, like, weird, we may see some weirdness, but I think the fights should be fun.
It's not so bad now that I'm looking the whole card over again. I'm feeling a little better about it thanks to your sunny disposition, Zane. For whatever reason, I think maybe because it's a Fox card. So to me, a Fox card, I always expect like almost a pay-per-view, or sometimes pay-per-view quality on free TV. This is probably the weakest Fox card lineup they've ever had, but it's not a bad fight night card.
Yeah, as a Fox card, it's really. Oh, did you see that thing going around on Twitter about how this might be a Joe Silva in joke?
Why is that?
Because the fight card is Home Alone in Chicago.
Home Alone?
Yep.
Who's alone?
No, it's Holly Holm alone. That's the whole fight card is being sold on
Home Alone in Chicago. Well, Joe Silva does love his horrible joke name matchups. Although I think Sean Shelby made this one. So
okay,
how much do we know about Sean Shelby's sense of humor? That's what this one really depends on.
That's what it comes down to. But like you see, like there's no way. But then you think about like the history of Joe Silva being willing to like put together really weird, funky in-joke.
Joe Silva was the guy who brought Sean Shelby in too, so it may have been his horrible sense of humor with which Joe really connected.
Yeah. So I admit, as a Fox card, yeah, this really underwhelms. But I don't care about any of that. That to me doesn't even. I try to ignore the business side of what the UFC is doing as much as possible. So the platform to me, it's like, to me, Fox is FS1. I don't watch TV. So
they're both effectively free to me. So
yeah, and they're both going to be the same commercial drag. So it's not like
Yeah.
oh, it's a Fox show, so it should be better pacing than FS1 or something like that. No, I'm just going to still get the same massive amount of commercial filler behind a TV card, you know?
Yeah.
The only benefit is that because it's a Fox card, it's only 4 fights on Fox. Well, okay, no, it's 8. I forgot. The prelims are on Fox too. Because I was going to say, it's only 4 fights long instead of 6 on FS1.
4-5 main card's automatically better, though. If a 4-5 main card starts at 10, there's no way they can stretch it past 1 a.m. So, I mean, I say that, but that's probably a challenge to the people in charge of the broadcast.
It's also probably a less valuable pairing for Fox. Like with FS1, they really are like, let's stretch this as long as possible. The more people we keep watching, the longer these people stick around, the better. With this, it's like, no, we actually have other like high value programming to get to that will attract viewers.
Good point. They're not trying to falsely inflate the ratings on their main channel.
Yeah. Either way, it's not, like I say, I'm not going to try to convince anyone. I would never tell a casual MMA fan friend of mine, like, oh, you've got to watch this card. If somebody doesn't know there's a card going on this weekend, I will not tell them. I will say, go live with your family. Do social things. Go out drinking, good sir. Do not waste your time.
But for those of us who need to be scared straight away from MMA, it's all right. It'll do.
For the scared straight crowd, it should be fun enough. That brings us to our first bout of the night, a heavyweight match. Dmitry Smolyakov versus Luis Henrique. And Connor, why don't you take this one?
We can just run through this one pretty quickly. It's a heavyweight fight. Luis Henrique was brought in to fight Francis Ngannou in his debut, basically trying to see where both guys were. Ngannou's moved on since then. That was Henrique's last fight. And Dmitry Smolyakov is undefeated, 8-0, but all first-round finishes. So huge question marks as to what he actually can do. He's mostly blowing people out in the first round, and none of them are worth anything. Now, that's true of Henrique as well. And there's two sides, because Henrique's gone to the distance several times, which is great for him going forward, but also might imply that he has trouble finishing guys who are not that good, whereas at least Smolyakov is blowing out these these professional opponents. I still am going to pick Henrique here, though, for 2 reasons. One, he's very awkward and stiff on the striking and everything, but I haven't really seen anything that blows me away about Smolyakov's striking. I know that Henrique is durable, and I know that he's got decent wrestling and a pretty solid top game as far as jiu-jitsu is concerned. I know he can go the distance, and I kind of doubt Smolyakov can with his frame and his explosive style. And Henrique is only 22. So Henrique is still at a point where he could see rapid improvement. Smolyakov is probably more or less done developing. He's 33. So he could make some changes. Heavyweights are old, but 22 versus 33, I think there's more upside in a 22-year-old. So I'm going with the Brazilian.
Wow. Well, I was going to say that I said before that there are no goat slaughtering heavyweight bouts to talk about on this card, because
maybe this is one.
Yeah, I mean, it's starting to sound like one of these dudes needs to get his sacrificial altar out and start praying to the heavyweight gods, because I'm picking Smolyakov here, and I think that it's kind of the exact opposite thing, where I look at Henrique as a fighter who, like, guys who come off the Brazilian circuit having been great wrestlers in the Brazilian circuit and depending on being great wrestlers on the Brazilian circuit. Like, it's one thing if you're a great wrestler on the Brazilian circuit and you have a really powerful striking game or grappling game to go with it. It's another thing if you were just that guy who was actually able to get takedowns on in a circuit where nobody else is wrestling or defending them. Mm-hmm. And Smolyakov or Henrique is much more that guy to me. And Smolyakov, like, he's kind of unknown. He's crushed a lot of cans, but he's also the wrestling coach for, like, I think he's for, like, Joanna Champions camp or for one of the major Polish camps there. Like, he's a pretty decorated Greco-Roman freestyle wrestler out of Russia.
It's true.
And I don't think that Henrique can press a wrestling advantage on him. And without that, in a matchup of if these two are forced to strike, I think Smolyakov is a much more natural striker.
That is absolutely a fact.
Yeah. Like, he reminds me a little bit, and not to put any hyperbole on this, but stylistically he reminds me a little bit of like latter career Dan Henderson, in that like he's just this kind of he's got this very Greco-Roman shuffle, where it's just kind of like scooting himself into range, and then he'll just absolutely uncork a beautiful straight cross and level somebody with it. And I think that can translate really well to the heavyweight division if he's able to just kind of be patient and keep his defense about him. And, he seems like he's got some decent head movement, upper body movement that he works on. And if he can just kind of make that work for him as this impossible to take down, hard punching monolith, I mean, we saw how far that took Ben Rothwell without any of the wrestling background. So I'm picking Smolyakov here. I think Henrique is going to try to take him down, and it won't happen. The odds on this fight are pretty close. Smolyakov is the favorite, -138 to -175. Henrique +140 to +118. I would say, as an aside to that the fact that Smolyakov is coming off that Russian scene does mean that if Henrique does get takedowns, he'll probably be able to submit him. Like, I doubt that Smolyakov's bottom game is all that good.
Yeah,
out of a lot of the developing fighters.
He's gone for some very awkward guillotines in his time on the Russian circuit. If it does go to the ground, I think Henrique is a brown belt.
Yeah,
jiu-jitsu under a pretty reputable coach. So
there is that. I don't trust many heavyweights to be successful wrestlers, frankly. Like, it seems like very, very few of them are able to actually regularly hit takedowns and maintain control.
Which is crazy. I think it's just because there aren't many great heavyweight takedown artists.
Yeah.
Like, there aren't that many great offensive wrestlers, because heavyweight should be the easiest division in which to hold someone down. And yet there are just not many guys who can really take people off their feet like that.
No. Or, and if they do, as we saw in the Roy Nelson versus Derek Lewis fight, Derek Lewis, whenever he feels like he really wants to, can just kind of like post and stand up with Roy Nelson
against Blades. Maybe there's a point in the middle where wrestling is most effective. Maybe it's like a middleweight. Maybe at heavyweight the guys are too strong for just weight alone to be enough to hold them down.
Yeah. It's a weird thing, but I don't trust Henrique's wrestling game or Henrique's wrestling game in a matchup like this. And that brings us to Jim Ehlers versus Jason Knight. Jason Knight's one of those dudes where I'm actually gonna have to see him win a UFC fight to pick him to win a UFC fight, because he's a very successful guard grappler off the regional scene and not an elite jiu-jitsu competitor off the region. Like, in the world of jiu-jitsu, it's not like Jason Knight was a world-class black belt out there winning Mundials or Worlds or something like that, or going to the Eddie Bravo Invitational or Metamoris. He's just a good grappler on the regional scene who had a lot of success off his back. That so rarely works at a high level in the UFC. We saw him get pretty well shut down by Kawajiri. Granted, Jim Ehlers is not Kawajiri. Ehlers is he's more willing to take less advantageous grappling positions for a finish. He's a more willing scrambler than Kawajiri, and that could get him in trouble versus Knight. But Ehlers has got a pretty powerful, compact frame. He's at his best when he's scrambling on the ground, and I feel like I can. I don't trust him to stay ahead of Knight, but I just think he can. And on the feet, he's a really powerful, solid puncher, even though he's a very wooden striker. Like, he doesn't land that many clean shots, but when he does, he hits really hard. So I'm picking Ehlers here to force Knight to pull guard and then be able to ride him out for decision.
Yeah, when you fight Tatsuya Kawajiri and you just repeatedly accept the takedowns and try to play guard, even in the third round when it hasn't worked for 10 straight minutes, that raises some serious questions about your potential in elite MMA. It's not a style that tends to work at this level. Jim Ayler's, like you said, all-rounder, good in scrambles on the ground. He will go for opportunistic takedowns. I think he probably wins this one on the feet. Like you said, he's a capable striker, doesn't blow you away, but he is actually getting a little better over time. I think he showed some improved defense in that Cole Miller fight, and he shouldn't even have needed to improve to outstrike Jason Knight, who basically just kind of does this until you look away and then he'll pull guard. Like really no takedown game, no real effective striking. It's just guard for Jason Knight, and it's tough to see it working. So I'm going with Ehlers too.
Yeah, and I can absolutely see Ehlers getting tapped to a triangle, getting a little over aggressive in a scramble or something like that.
But the thing is, Ehlers doesn't have to play that to win this fight.
Yeah, it's true. That brings us to Hector Urbina versus George Sullivan. So I want the deep technical analysis on this fight. Deep tech.
Hector Urbina could front headlock George Sullivan on an ill-advised takedown attempt, or George Sullivan could knock Hector Urbina out because he's kind of a wooden striker with not many things in his arsenal. I'm going with the latter. I think George Sullivan pressures Urbina. I think he gets him in the clinch. I think he probably survives a scare or two on the ground, but largely I think he has his way with Urbina on the feet, punishes him for his takedown attempts, and knocks him out in the round number 2.
Yeah, watching Urbina get handily out wrestled and grappled by Edgar Garcia in his, a couple fights ago too, and then just mauled by Fabinski. Yeah, really doesn't give me a lot of faith in Urbina to consistently press any kind of wrestling or grappling advantage. And in fact, as bad as Sullivan has been trading takedowns and grappling positions with people, I actually have more faith in his ability to be a sprawling ground and pound fighter in this fight.
Urbina's a weird ATT fighter, isn't he?
He is really strange. His
doesn't seem like anyone from that team.
No, and his technical bag is it is as full of holes as I can imagine a fighter's game being. Yeah.
It's single kicks at range, sometimes lunging into a punch, not that good of a takedown game, and counter submissions.
Yeah.
That's those are his strong areas with very deep valleys between each one.
Yeah, I teased out on Twitter that we'd be talking about process a lot here, and this is one of those things where I just like the way Sullivan fights a lot more. It's turned out as he's gone on in the UFC that he doesn't have the technical depth anywhere to be a really elite fighter. Yakovlev, the moment they got into any kind of body touching exchange, Yakovlev was like, "Oh, I can out wrestle you in a heartbeat." So and then knocked him out.
Mm-hmm.
But Urbina just doesn't have any of the technique is so sparse and thinly spread that I have much more trust in Sullivan's ability to bully and land big single shots outside and even hit takedowns when he wants and land ground and pound than I do on Urbina being able to either catch a one-off knockout shot or a sort of random miracle submission.
Yeah.
So Sullivan's I got to pick Sullivan there too. Odds on that, Sullivan is coming in at -190 up to -220. Hector Urbina +180 down to +155. That's fine. I mean, like I say, Sullivan has shown that he doesn't have the technical depth anywhere to just be a consistently dominant force out there. And Urbina, for his weird and really inconsistent performances, has. I don't know what I don't really know what Urbina brings to the table. He's kind of in the who are we talking about?
He's a classic regional circuit journeyman. Urbina's the guy who the regional promotion brings him in so you can beat him as a prospect to win their title. He's a guy who he's tough, but not that durable. He has a he can do things in all areas, but can't connect the pieces, and he can catch you off guard if you're not careful. But he has no process. That is the real thing with Urbina. No process, and not even like the completeness of skill set to be able to hang a process on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Who was it we were talking about in reference to McGregor, whose name I've now totally forgotten earlier? Artem Lobov. He's the Mexican-American Artem Lobov.
He's better on the ground than Artem, that's for damn sure. But
yeah, he's better on the ground. But it's that same kind of like, how does a 10-10 dude get in the UFC? Like, Hector Urbina is that same kind of level of regional opponent where, like, your prospects beat this guy to really show that they're surefire prospects. And then the fact that he's fighting at this level, you're kind of like, well, why? You know, this is a dude who loses every other fight to guys like Nissen Osternak and Tyler Beckley. So,
what can you say? Hey, the guy earned his shot already. He was on the Ultimate Fighter. God damn it!
I know. I will say though, I do think it'll be a completely sloppy brawl. I think that it will just be like a funky as hell slop fight. I do not expect it to be like a positional, stifling grind in any way.
It would be a real disappointment if it was.
Yeah. That brings us to Alex Oliveira versus James Moontasri. And if the Sullivan Urbina fight is a study in process, no process at the low end, this is more like a study in process, no process at the middle end. This is more of what I expect out of an average UFC fight, in which one dude is a really flashy fighter with zero interconnecting tools, and another dude has interconnecting tools. I have to pick Oliveira here. Moontasri, like, watching him get out-wrestled pretty handily for a while by Anton Zafir. And, like, that really puts almost no faith in me to his ability.
Zafir is the guy you were talking about, but the Australian version. Like, yeah. He's not that good a wrestler. He just is the best wrestler in his area. So to be out-wrestled by that guy, not a great look.
Not a great look. And Oliveira has shown the consistent ability, if he needs to hit takedowns to change a fight, he can do that. Like, if he feels like he's not getting the striking battle to go his way, he can take you down and start to out-grapple you. And the thing is, unlike the Zafir fight, unlike the Cody Pfister fight, Moontasri isn't the notably better athlete here. Alex Oliveira is a good athlete. He's got that, that rodeo bull rider super strength that is just like, even if he's not the flashiest athlete all the time, he just seems like he's incredibly tough and wiry. Mm-hmm. And I trust him to be the better grappler than James Moontasri. And on the feet, Moontasri has this really bad habit of just looking to set up these huge power shots. And guys touch him up there. Like, Zafir cracked him on the feet a few times. And, obviously Kevin Lee bulldozed him, and Joe Ellenberger beat him up. And I really trust Oliveira to stay on Moontasri and not give him the chance to set up big shots and to take him down if he needs to. So I got to pick Oliveira here.
Yeah. There is really no other pick to make in this fight. Moontasri is like the Sage Northcutt type, but not even quite as natural with some areas of the game. He's all dynamicism, all athleticism, really relies on the element of surprise. Like, he'll beat a guy if he's not good enough to know what a spinning wheel kick looks like. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Or if he's not good enough to tell the difference between a takedown and a flying knee. Like, basic stuff like that, where he can really surprise them by being quick and launching into some unorthodox technique. Alex Oliveira is just as athletic, but a lot more reliant on fundamental things. He seems to get MMA a lot more, even not being that great of a grappler. As we've seen when he's been stuck against guys like Cerrone and Gilbert Burns, actually great grapplers, he still manages to out-grapple most of his opponents. He has a natural knack for finding the back, as you said, taking guys down and controlling them. And then at distance, he moves really well. He's awkward, but not totally reliant on weirdness. He's got good straight punches, counters well. He's got a lot going for him. The Cerrone fight was too much. I think we expected it to be. But I hope for more big things out of Oliveira, and I think this is definitely going to be a step back onto the winning track for him. So the question is really, how does he win? And I kind of think he'll knock Moontasri out.
I'm picking rear naked choke.
That seems fairly likely as well.
Yeah, I do think he will stop Moontasri, though. Moontasri is just too hittable. Like, he's too overwhelmable. You know, he has to battle his way out of a lot of bad spots.
Well, and Moontasri, like, the worst thing about being a fighter like Moontasri, being all dynamicism, all athleticism, is that when you're tired, your entire game falls apart.
Yeah.
Like, when Moontasri is gassed, he does not fight well. It's just because that's the glue that holds his weird bag of tricks together, is him feeling like he can explode at any moment. And when he loses that feeling...
We've seen Oliveira tired in his fight with Joe Merritt and his fight with Piotr Holman, and he was still, working well late, and in that Holman fight knocked him out late. Like, he still has the consistent delivery. He still knows what he's pressing for late in fights.
Yeah, James Moontasri goes slack when he gets tired. Alex Oliveira just gets loose.
Mm-hmm. That brings us to one of the fights that I feel could be the least exciting on the card. Michel Prazeres versus JC Cottrell.
Probably will be one of the least exciting fights on the card. Cottrell has a weird game, a very weird game. He's not a great striker, but a willing one. He's pretty hittable. An okay wrestler. Quite good on the ground, but not outstanding. He's quite good. He's got some good transitions, decent control, good back taker, but just doesn't have that kind of next level positional control you'd like to see from someone who really specializes in that aspect. Michel Prazeres has kind of lacked that too in the UFC. He has kind of struggled to implement the same overpowering game that he had. He, like Cottrell, is a capable but not amazing striker. Fortunately for him, he's got some real natural power, so he can scare guys off, but he tends to really just plant his feet and throw, and usually on the counter, like a lot of inexperienced strikers do. He's much more comfortable letting his opponent lead. Fortunately for him, I think Cottrell will absolutely lead, but I just don't see... I can see two things happening. I can see a really awful kickboxing match here where neither guy can get each other down and they both decide to strike. And I think Prazeres wins that fight because I think at some point Cottrell comes in, his chin flies up in the air as he throws a punch, because that happens every time he throws a punch, and Prazeres clips him and either finishes him or like seals a round that will win him the fight.
Ah, crap. And there's Connor gone. He should be right back. So I would usually interject, but the time it takes him to get back in, see, he's already back. All right.
What perfect timing, right? Or I was saying, they end up grappling and Prazeres' ridiculous strength ends up giving him an advantage. And also the fact that Prazeres has a lot more high-level experience. Cottrell has just about as many fights. One less, but hasn't fought the same level of guys. He's fought some okay guys on the regional scene, but even then, they've not all been blowout performances. It's mostly guys with like 6-3 kind of records, and he has some close fights with them. So I like Prazeres.
Cottrell is kind of the classic case of a guy regionally who has done well against a lot of all right regional kind of journeyman level opponents. And when he fights his best opponents, it's not even when he fights his best opponents, and he loses to some of them. He's lost to some of them, and they've all been stoppages. I mean, I was getting him confused because I had to do a thing on. I got him confused with Hector Sandoval briefly because I just had to do a big write up on Cottrell, Sandoval, and Joe Gelati. But anyway, yeah, he's. The big thing I would say out of Cottrell for me is that honestly, he's not a good control grappler. And that's the big problem.
Yeah.
He's actually a very aggressive submission hunter. Like, he's got a nice power double. He hits a good power double. But the moment he gets somebody down, he will almost always try to advance to an immediate submission position.
You watch him and it feels like he could be a good control grappler with a different mindset. Like at times he will anticipate someone's move on the bottom and he will float on top of them and take the transition. You're like, he could totally stay on top of them and not lose position, but he's so eager to go for those dominant positions and latch into submission that he doesn't. It's a lot of like jumping on the back, getting shaken off, going for an arm bar as you fall, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And I do think I think partially here with Prazeres, like I do wonder whether or not Prazeres can get him down at all, because Cottrell he's got a pretty good wrestling background, or at least he was a high school wrestler. He seems to be pretty reliant on it. And I haven't seen him get taken down much regionally. And I don't know. The big question here comes for me is with Prazeres' gas tank. Like if Prazeres can't, like maybe he lands some big bombs early, and if he can't put Cottrell away, and it is this terrible kickboxing match, I have a lot more. I have the feeling that Cottrell could be a lot better late than Prazeres.
He's also only got 2 weeks notice for this fight, though.
That's true.
I think that tilts things back in Prazeres' favor.
In general, I have to pick Prazeres because he's more athletic, he has more power, and he's not coming in on short notice. And they have very similar games, but this to me has bad 3-round kickboxing match written all over it. Like Prazeres just doesn't have any of the consistency of technique striking to knock guys out. Like, and that's what we see over and over in his whole career. Like he has 1 knockout in his whole career, despite having good power. Yeah. He cannot deliver that power well enough, consistently enough to not only hurt someone, but to then finish them.
I think he doesn't have he can't move and punch at the same time. I don't think he has the footwork to finish guys off. Like even when he does hurt them, it's because they come to him, he plants and hits them with 2 or 3 good shots, and then he can't follow up.
Yeah, and while he has a decent submission game, he has a decent power sub game. Cottrell's a practiced enough fighter there that I don't see, him just getting the instant submission. Yeah. So at that point, I think this could easily be just 3 rounds of 2 dudes whiffing on a lot of shots, and Prazeres maybe landing the better for a round or 2, and taking the early half of the fight, and then getting tired and dropping his hands a bunch, and getting hit with a lot of 1-2 simple straights that Cottrell likes to throw. And we get this funky split scorecard that makes nobody happy in an ugly fight that didn't do anything for anyone. Like
sounds about right. That sounds about right.
So I'm leaning Prazeres for the short notice and the power differential, but it's not. That may be a sandwich fight. The odds on that fight, Prazeres is the favorite, -217 to -260. Cottrell +205 down to +170. Those odds to me are very long on Prazeres. I don't think that he's earned those odds quite, even though he's got a long record of winning, but so does Cottrell at that point, if that's all you're going off of. Yeah. I don't think Prazeres has earned those odds, but I wouldn't then turn around and bet on Cottrell. Like this has ugly split decision written all over it.
It's an unbettable fight.
It is. And that brings us to Kamaru Usman versus Alexander Yakovlev in a fight that I'm really thrilled about. Really honestly thrilled about, because it is weirdly a skill fight. It's 2 similarly skilled fighters who should make for a really interesting matchup. Like normally if I see a fight like the Prazeres Cottrell fight, it's kind of like, well, that could end up just being a really bad kickboxing match because neither of them is going to be the dominant wrestler. But the thing is here, I feel really certain that both Yakovlev and Usman will be dedicated to the idea that they can both out-wrestle and outstrike their opponent.
And they kind of both need to do both to win.
Yeah. I'm interested to see the technical matchup here in the wrestling, because the thing with Yakovlev has been off and on, and it's really hard to judge because he's huge. He's 6'3" as a welterweight. Off and on, he's been incredibly physically underwhelming. And sometimes he's really physically dominant. So you don't really know how he's going to match up until he's in the cage against somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Because it'll be like he'll be in there with Damian Maia or Nico Musoke, and he'll just look like the weaker, frailer guy that can be pushed around, thrown off his technical game, and outworked. And then he fights Gray Maynard and George Sullivan, neither of whom are small or underpowered.
Though he did fight Gray Maynard at lightweight.
He fought Gray Maynard at lightweight. So he was a massive lightweight.
Yeah, it was upsetting to see Yakovlev at 155. Yeah. He didn't look good.
No, he didn't look good. But he fights those guys, also neither of whom are particularly small or weak fighters, and just absolutely physically dominates them both.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm kind of have this question of like, what do I expect to see from him in this fight? I have to pick Usman here because I think the matchup is a lot closer to Nico Musoke versus Alexander Yakovlev than it is George Sullivan versus Alexander Yakovlev. I don't like Usman is a 3-time D2, is it? National champion.
And for MMA, so he's been a pretty outstanding wrestler.
Yeah, I don't think that Yakovlev may have a little more craftiness in his game. Usman, even as a wrestler, was a very power-based, like insane strength wrestler. So Yakovlev may have a little more craft because of that insane power and strength that Usman has. I don't see Yakovlev being able to implement that craft. Doing something like catching a kick that Sullivan throws and then picking the ankle and like a shoulder and picking up Sullivan bodily and dumping him. I don't see Usman giving him that kind of leverage. And Yakovlev is probably the slightly slicker boxer, but Usman has shown a increasing ability, especially in that Edwards fight, to eat strikes from a slicker fighter and come back with more power and enough power to scare that striker off his game. And Yakovlev, despite his knockout over Sullivan, has rarely been a knockout puncher, except for very early in his career when he was fighting Cans. He has not shown much knockout ability. I feel like this could be a lot more. He'll come in a lot more like his Paul Daly fight, where he'll try and like clinch stall a lot and find that he's in there with somebody who can outmuscle him and out wrestle him for a decision. And I know it could end up being a bit of a grind because of that, but I'm really excited to see the actual technical matchup of that grind because I think it could be really interesting.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I think Yakovlev, I think he is a pretty impactful puncher. I think he's got a bit of the Rashid Magomedov in him. Very precise, quite powerful, not a great finisher.
Yeah.
And so like, a lot of fights you'll see Yakovlev clip somebody clean. Like it's rare these days that somebody can hurt Gray Maynard and not finish him. And that was Alexander Yakovlev, as a much bigger, more powerful guy in that fight. So that just kind of paints a picture of who he is as a striker. But I said in my Sherdog preview, I said this is like an upgrade of the classic matchup because it's wrestler who can strike versus striker who can wrestle. Yakovlev is a very solid defensive wrestler and a pretty good offensive wrestler as well. He's got a bit of that Alexander Gustafsson in him. He'll use his movement and his angles to set up reactive shots, can really throw a lot of guys who expect to strike with him off. It definitely threw off George Sullivan and definitely threw off Gray Maynard, took both of those guys down. Kamaru Usman, the better wrestler. Like I said, in MMA, he's been a pretty outstanding wrestler, very physical, but also has really solid technique. And then a solid striker, but not a great striker yet. He's got a great technical coach in Henry Hooft, who I am rapidly starting to think is actively detrimental to his fighters in the corner just as actively beneficial as he is to them in the gym. Yeah. But Usman has definitely very clearly benefited from Hooft's training at the Blackzilians team. His striking looks really solid in the Edwards fight. And the good thing for him in this fight is that he has volume, which Yakovlev does not have, and he has flow between phases in the way that Yakovlev does not. I think that is Usman's big advantage here. A big part of what got him the win in the Edwards fight was being able to take a shot and respond, but also being able to set his shots up off of his wrestling. He would go for a clinch and did some nice damage in the clinch. He would go for a shot and then later would come in and throw a 3-punch combo when Edwards was ready to sprawl. That's the kind of stuff that I think can freeze Yakovlev up a bit and allow Usman to at least hang with him enough on the feet to beat him on the ground, if not actually narrowly beat him on the feet purely. So I think Usman by unanimous decision. But I love this matchup because I think Yakovlev's a really good test for Usman at this point. He's obviously got a ton of experience, not just in MMA, but also I think in like Russian hand-to-hand and in Sambo. I think he's a master of sport in both of those.
And in freestyle wrestling.
So, yeah, right. So in wrestling, too, he's got a lot of combat sports experience in general, in addition to having 30 MMA fights under his belt to Usman's 8. And he could absolutely clip Usman and hurt him. Usman has been hurt in the past. He's always recuperated well, but we know that he can be hurt. So it's a real test for Usman. I think he passes it, but I'm very much looking forward to watching it play out.
One last note on this fight, too, for me, is that Yakovlev, even back in his M1 days, not just talking about the Damian Maia fight or something, has been willing to accept being on his back when he gets put there. Like, if somebody can put him on his back rather than having a really, I'm going to try to stand up now based game, he'll try and look for crafty submissions and things like that, which can sometimes get somebody somewhere, but he's not really a good enough grappler off his back to do that.
Mm-hmm. You gotta have Firas Zahabi's mindset there. You gotta have a 60-second guard. If you're gonna play guard, you go for a leg lock or throw up your legs and hit a submission or get a sweep off of it. And if a minute goes by and you haven't gotten it, you are standing up immediately. You know, if you're gonna play submissions off your back, I think that's the only way to really consistently do it in MMA nowadays, unless you are an exceptional talent as a grappler, a guy like Charles Oliveira or, someone like that.
Yeah. All right. The odds on this fight, let's see. Usman is the favorite, -227 to -260. Yakovlev is the underdog, +212 to +175. I'm pretty comfortable with those odds. It's a step forward in competition for Usman, so there's no reason he should be a massive favorite. Mm-hmm. And Yakovlev is really experienced and decent everywhere, so it should be a good fight. I'm looking forward to it a lot. And that brings us to the prelim co-main, which that's so meaningful. I almost skipped a fight. But Darren Elkins versus Godofredo Pepe.
Let's see. Is that the co-main? What's the featured prelim?
Saenz versus Wineland.
Oh, see. They didn't have the bout order listed, so when I wrote my preview, I did a full thing for Saenz versus Wineland, like a full main card feature. So mine are all out of order. Elkins, Castro, Pepe. Well, Zane, first of all, I have to congratulate you on successfully picking Darren Elkins in his last fight. You don't out Elkins the Elkins. You can't outgrind the grinder. You're absolutely true there. I think that same dynamic's going to be at play here, even though Pepe is not going to fight exactly the same way Scaly did. He's not going to match Elkins. He's still going to have to fight Elkins in Elkins' areas of expertise. Elkins, I think, gets the advantage of Pepe on the feet just because he's durable and he throws volume. He throws a lot. He's very awkward coming forward, but he just keeps plugging away. He keeps coming, mixing up takedown attacks, punches, kicks, everything. Doesn't really care if you hit him. Weird, like unathletic awkwardness. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Why are his feet in that position? Why is he ducking so weirdly? What was that punch from that weird angle? But it works for him because his pace, his volume, and the fact that you got to worry about his takedowns and his clinch It totally works for him. And Pepe is dangerous, much more dangerous as a striker than Elkins, but like one shot at a time, very explosive stuff. Really unlikely to get that kind of stuff to work against Elkins. And then once you get into the grappling, I could totally see Pepe submitting Elkins. It could totally happen. Elkins was submitted by Charles Oliveira. Pepe has a similarly dangerous ground game, though I'm not sure there anybody in this division really comes close to Oliveira for pure submission wizardry. But that right there is the reason that I don't see it happening, because no one else comes close to Oliveira. That's the guy who, if someone's going to sub you at featherweight, it's going to be Oliveira. And Pepe, I think the willingness with which he plays guard game, the fact that he's so perfectly happy to be on his back and go for fairly traditional submissions, arm bars, triangles, I don't think that's going to surprise Darren Elkins. And Darren Elkins he's basically, if you stop Darren Elkins, you're a division elite. You're Chad Mendez, who knocked him out, or you're Charles Oliveira, who submitted him, and nobody else in featherweight has done it. So I think Darren Elkins will win a decision. I think he's going to grind Pepe out.
Yeah, I mean, the only other people who tend to beat Darren Elkins, or have beat him for that matter, other than Ted Worthington off a doctor stoppage early in his career, a 13-second doctor stoppage, is...
That's very strange.
I know. The only other people who beat him are people who are better athletes, who can deliver more, who can deliver better volume on their feet as better athletes, like Hakran Diaz and Jeremy Stevens. Neither of whom are like the elite of the division, but they're both very good athletes who can deliver a better standard of striking than Darren Elkins, and by being better athletes could also keep him off of them.
Yeah, and there are even like solid athletes like Rob Whiteford and Lucas Martins that can't do it.
Yeah, if you're just a solid athlete, if you're just an equivalent athlete, or maybe even
I think Rob Whiteford's pretty clearly more athletic than Darren Elkins in the sense we usually use it, and he still couldn't beat him.
Yeah,
couldn't match his pace.
You have to be nearly or an actually elite athlete to just kind of outwork him there. Otherwise, you have to be a great finisher, and Pepe is a good finisher. But, he's also the kind of dude who gets knocked out by Sam Sicilia and Felipe Arantes.
It'd be amazing if Darren Elkins knocked him out. I love seeing Darren Elkins knock someone out, even though I have a weird fondness for Antonio Carvalho. What a silly-ass knockout that was from Darren Elkins. Like, Darren Elkins is not supposed to run through someone with like a 5-punch combination and put him to sleep. I would be very happy to see that happen again.
Yeah, it should also be noted on Elkins' sub-loss to Oliveira. That was, 3 years and 2 UFC fights into Elkins' career. So it's he's obviously, I think, improved his defensive grappling since then. Like, in that Skelly fight, he just shut Skelly down. Like, it wasn't... Skelly never got close to a submission in any sense. And that...
Is Elkins still at Alpha Male?
I'm not sure.
He was cornered by Justin Buckles in his last fight.
I think he must be.
I think Alpha Male might actually be pretty good for guys like Elkins and Guida. Like, I think those guys at this point with this much experience probably just need solid training partners just to stay sharp and just keep doing what they're doing.
Yeah, I think so. And that, they can just keep them a little, like, sand off just a little bit of rough edge here and there without actually, like, massively changing anything. And that's...
You give Darren Elkins a wrestling room, basically, and he's going to be Darren Elkins.
Yeah, and he's tough, and he has, 15 minutes of absolutely unbreakable cardio. So it's hard to, like, if Pepe doesn't get a first-round sub, it's going to be way, way, way downhill. Like, Pepe has one decision in his career, and it was a third round, or it was a split over Milton Vieira. Every other fight, he's finished one fight in the third round, his second fight in his career. Everything else has been a first round finish or a loss. So
you never know. We thought that was the key evidence for Joe Lozon losing to Diego Sanchez, and look how that shit turned out. The other shoe finally dropped with Diego Sanchez.
I know, and it dropped to Joe Lozon.
The one time we didn't think it would happen, it finally fucking dropped.
I know. I've been waiting for that shoe for 5 years. It dropped with Joe Lozon. Seriously.
Oh.
All right. The odds on this fight, Elkins is the favorite, -181 to -210. Pepe is the underdog, +165 to +150. I think it's a little short, frankly. I think Pepe's odd. His shot, like, he has a shot, but it's a long shot to me. Like, it's a Hail Mary.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would still call that bettable.
No, maybe
just
not.
Just because, especially with Elkins in like the -200 neighborhood, if he comes down to around 160 or something by fight time, if people like those Pepe odds because he's a finisher, then I might consider it.
Yeah, but it just feels like you're really looking at a real long shot win for Godofredo Pepe, where he has to hit a Hail Mary or he loses.
In general, I don't think this is a very bettable card, by the way.
No, it really is kind of. There are a lot of middling fighters fighting each other, which tends to lead to a lot of weird decisions.
Yeah, it's also, I think, also because they're cards with no hype are. Sometimes cards with no hype are extremely bettable because no one knows who a good guy coming in is. But a lot of times when it's established fighters and it has no hype, nobody's expectations are high, and so the lines just accurately reflect the fights, and that means they're not bettable.
Yeah, or you just get a bunch of guys that you can't trust. You're like, I don't trust this at all. So, all right. That brings us to Frankie Saenz, Eddie Wineland. And I do not trust Eddie Wineland to win this fight at all. Like, Saenz has holes in his game. He's not as good a striker as he wants to be. He's a better striker than people think he is. Like, that's the flip side of that, is that he actually can land some hard shots and he will strike consistently.
Not as good a striker as he thinks he is, better than everyone else thinks he is.
Yes, exactly. He toes that weird fine line perfectly on the feet. And then as a wrestler and grappler, he's really, really solid. And Wineland's just not the dude he was. Like, watching him in that Caraway fight, which Caraway is also not as good a striker as he thinks he is, but better than people think he is. Like, he just couldn't pull the trigger. You know, you're still seeing the movement. He still looks like he has the speed. He looks like he's coming out, charging out of the gate, and then he's faint, and no trigger. Like, the punch never comes. And I think that there's too much Saenz can do with that. He's tough. Especially at range, Saenz is actually pretty good at staying defensively sound and keeping in mind how to stay safe. Where he got in trouble with Uriah Faber was the clinch, where he thought he could he thought he could be the better technical fighter in the clinch.
He's used to dominating there, and he couldn't against Uriah. And
Faber is just way too powerful. But Wineland's not a great clinch fighter by any stretch. Wineland can be a great pocket fighter at his height when he could take a shot and just stand in and brawl. And otherwise, he's an out fighter looking to jump in with one hard shot and get back out before he gets hit. And if he's not pulling the trigger on those hard shots, then he's just going to be waiting outside until Saenz closes him down, takes him down, and roughs him up a bit. So I'm not necessarily picking Saenz to get a stoppage here, but I think that he can just outwork Wineland for 3 rounds.
Yeah, it's kind of a shame because I was just really starting to realize how good Eddie Wineland once was when he was right at the edge of declining. Like, he fought Scott Jorgensen. I think that was the first time I really paid attention to Eddie Wineland. I was like, okay. And then he fought Brad Pickett, and I didn't think that fight needed to be a split. I thought he pretty clearly won it. And then he did pretty well against Renan Barão before getting knocked out. And then it was like, a steep downhill. And it feels more drastic than it actually has been because the Caraway fight was such a departure from what Wineland once was, probably because it was in the instant aftermath of a knockout that broke Eddie Wineland's jaw, but also because that's been his only fight in the last 2.5 years almost. In the last like 26 months, Eddie Wineland has not fought a lot lately. He has now been out for, by the time this fight happens, he will have been out for a year since his last fight with Brian Caraway. And I just don't see him getting better or regaining his old form. He has been in a lot of fights. He's been around the sport for quite some time. And Eddie Wineland's style, as much as I hate Joe Rogan complaining about his hand position in every goddamn fight Eddie Wineland has ever had, ooh, you wouldn't teach a young fighter to do this. That's Joe's favorite thing. But as much as I hate that, Eddie Wineland, the way Eddie Wineland fights with lower hands really is athletically demanding. It's like a Nassim Hamed kind of thing. He doesn't have a big defensive skill set. He really relies on being able to leap away or step to the side really quickly and come back. He needs that speed. And it really felt in the Caraway fight, because Caraway is a very, not plodding really, but a very like reliable pace from Brian Caraway. Pretty much the same kind of pressure, same speed on his punches every time, every fight. And Eddie Wineland had that in front of him and couldn't pull the trigger. It was like the little edge of athleticism and speed that was once there was not there, or something mentally was not there that wouldn't allow him. And either of those things, that's a bad way to be against Frankie Saenz. Thing with Frankie Saenz is like, because he thinks he's such a beast on the feet, he doesn't need to be as good a striker as he is.
Yeah.
He's tough. He hits hard. He throws a lot, and he bulls his way into the clinch where he is a very good takedown artist, a very hard striker. And like, this guy competitively scrambled, and I think actually won many of the scrambles with Uriah Faber.
Yeah, he beat Uriah Faber on the ground in that fight. It was just the feet. When they were at range or in the pocket, Faber tagged him up. And
he got horribly destroyed and somehow turned it into a third-round advantage for himself by somehow being the fresher fighter, because Uriah Faber, he just wouldn't die when Uriah Faber was trying to murder him, and it gave him the edge in the end of the fight. So Frankie Saenz is older than Eddie Wineland, but he's clearly still more in his prime as a fighter. And so I think the volume, the wrestling, Frankie Saenz is not going to hesitate to pull the trigger. He's going to pull the trigger more than he should and not really pay the price for it, unless Eddie Wineland has a sort of miracle return to form. Because like 3 years ago, 4 years ago, I probably would have picked Eddie Wineland here. But unless Eddie Wineland can really turn back the clock and be that guy he was 3 years ago, which I highly doubt, I think he's going to get beaten up here. And I kind of think he's going to get stopped. Because I'm picking Saenz by TKO just because I think either on the ground or with volume in the clinch, Wineland's going to get hurt by something and probably just like shell up and not be able to deal with the onslaught.
Yeah, I might pick Saenz by sub here just because he's got a pretty good back take, rear naked choke, top ride game when he's on the ground. And I could see him taking Wineland down or hurting him, and Wineland trying to like shell or scramble and just getting backpacked. The other thing worth noting here is that Wineland has been talking, like every time he's lost, or the 2 times he's lost fights, even I think the last loss he had before that when he broke his jaw, like he's been talking about retirement.
Yeah. And
he keeps talking about it. And he's got a full-time job as a firefighter and apparently, according to Wikipedia, a part-time job as for working for a maintenance company too. Like, this is a dude who it's fair to ask how dedicated he's going to be. Like, how much can we expect a guy to bounce back who's constantly like, maybe I shouldn't be doing this anymore?
Yeah, if you look at it through that lens, the Caraway fight really felt like a performance from a guy who wasn't ready to let go, but whose heart wasn't really in it. Like, it didn't look like Eddie Wineland. It didn't look like Eddie Wineland wanted to take the chance that Brian Caraway would hit him when going for a shot, or that Brian Caraway would take him down. And if you were that worried about that against Brian Caraway, not a knock on Brian Caraway, but he's not the same kind of whirlwind that Frankie Saenz is. It's going to be a lot, like if you're having those kinds of reservations, they're going to be much stronger against Frankie Saenz just because of his aggression.
Yeah. So Odds on this fight, Wineland is the underdog, plus 143 down to plus 125. Saenz, the favorite, minus 157 to minus 170. Those feel a bit like memory odds for Eddie Wineland.
Yeah, despite what I just said, I kind of think that's a bettable line for Frankie Saenz.
Yeah. Obviously, Wineland has been a very dangerous fighter in the past, so there's a chance he clips Saenz and knocks him out. But if he doesn't, I don't think he wins a decision. And Saenz himself he was knocked out once early in a fight, early in his career, and I think he's become a much more defensively sound fighter since. Like I said, the big place I think that Saenz can get hurt is in the clinch, and that's not really where Eddie has tended to hurt people.
Mm-hmm. And I only think he got hurt there because it was Uriah Faber.
Exactly.
I think he was really shocked by the fact that he couldn't do his normal thing in the clinch.
Yeah. Yeah. He's not bad in the clinch. It would just be like if Wineland were able to translate his athleticism there, then he might be able to catch Saenz kind of thinking that he's safe. Whereas outside at range, Saenz is really like hands up, move your head, move your feet, circle. You know, he's not just totally wide open as a striker.
No.
That brings us to the first Fox bout, Felice Herrig versus Kailin Curran. You going to still be on the train? You've been on the train all the way through.
What train is that?
The Kailin Curran train.
No, I'm dropping off actually.
All right.
Have I picked her in all of her fights?
You have, I believe.
That feels right. I probably have. I think it's too much of a step up. Kailin Curran has not. She feels like a fighter with a good amount of potential, but she just hasn't really improved. I'm starting to wonder if you know what? Okay, I'll say this. Kailin Curran is like a substantially less athletic and not quite as well trained Paige Van Zandt. That's kind of her thing, right? Mm-hmm. Like she's going to throw strikes. She's a little more comfortable at long range, but she can't keep herself there. And so she ends up fighting Paige Van Zandt's kind of fight, whether she wants to or not, especially when she was fighting Paige Van Zandt. She ends up in the clinch. She ends up having to get into scrambles on the ground. And especially with the grappling, she's not as skilled as Paige. The fact Paige is a solid grappler. She does weird things that are kind of endemic to women's MMA, like head and arm throws that for whatever reason female fighters are obsessed with. But the fact that she was totally dominated by Rose Namajunas is more because Namajunas is so good and not because Van Zandt is terrible. Because when Van Zandt fought Herrig, who was a solid grappler, she did really well on the ground. She escaped from all the submission threats and landed good punishing ground and pound. Curran doesn't have that. And so I think this fight's going to look a lot like Van Zandt Herrig, except Herrig's actually going to be able to have her way. I have a little bit of hope that Herrig will actually make some improvement as well. Apparently, she's been seeing like a sports psychologist or just a general psychologist to deal with depression and anxiety from a lot of her fights. And feels now, her team feels that she will actually be able to perform in the way she does in training in a fight. Who knows? A lot of fighters say that kind of stuff from one fight to the next. But even if it's the same Felice Herrig, she's more experienced. She's not bad on the feet any more so than Curran is. She's strong and she's better and a lot savvier on the ground than Curran. So I'm hopping off the train. I think it's Felice Herrig by submission.
Yeah, and to be fair, I didn't have any trouble with your Curran picks except for when you picked her over Paige Van Zandt, and I was what? Did
I do that?
Yeah. That was when you and Pat were both really high on her, and we're like, and everybody, like, all they remembered from Paige Van Zandt was her losing to Tisha Torres, and her, like, janky-ass, like, weird striking that she had at that point.
That was good. That's just what it looked like.
It was, wasn't it?
I can't believe I picked Kailin Curran over Paige Van Zandt.
I know, but yeah, the thing with Herrig is that, like, because of her personality, people want to think that she's really not a very good fighter at all.
Mm-hmm.
Like they want to think that she's Angela Magana, you know? Like, oh, I hate that woman's personality.
That's probably part of why I picked Curran over Van Zandt, because something about Van Zandt does not gel with me, and Curran seems very nice and like genuine. And Van Zandt, you know, there's something about Van Zandt. It's probably like nerdy high school kid having a high school cheerleader flashbacks and like popular girl. Exactly yeah, there's something weird about her that rubs me the wrong way. I don't know. Did you see that like Metro PCS commercial she did? She's like,
no.
So-and-so says he wants to buy me a pizza. And then she shows up at his door and she's like, let's go. And then they like run to Papa John's. She's like,
I know, but she'd never like hate somebody for a commercial, or like it's like hating somebody.
No, that's how she talks. That's how she sounds in real life.
I know, but it's like hating people. It's like when people get like really start hating fighters off of their tough stints. It's like you realize that all they did on Tough is film their worst moments when these people are like totally sleep deprived and then super cut them all together.
Yeah. No, me disliking Van Zandt says more about me than Van Zandt. She seems very nice. I'm sure she's very nice, but I don't like her. And the Felice Herrig is the same way to a lot of people. And I get it. I think you're saying that you get it too. She's got a weird, like, abrasive social media presence.
Yeah, she's got this very like I'm going to put myself out there, bank on my sexuality a lot, and you know, her and Esparza had this whole like Mean Girls thing on Tough that really got to a lot of people. But it kind of covers over the fact that she's a really respectable mid-tier action fighter.
Mm-hmm.
Like she's got a long kickboxing background, and she's an okay, serviceable kickboxer. She's tough standing. And the big thing for her really is that she's tough as hell in a fight. Like that's also the same thing with Paige Van Zandt that people kind of ended up overlooking. It was like, oh, she's really pretty. And then you actually see her in that Rose Namajunas fight. And it's like, you realize how tough this woman is. Like she will fight through hell and high water, even if she's losing. She's
at that Aisling Daly level in this division. Like not outstanding, but really reliable.
And Herrig's the same way. Like in her Torres fight, in her Van Zandt fight, in any fight she's had, Herrig, she's never been finished, and she's been tough as hell. She will always battle back. She will always fight as hard as she can, scramble through positions, go for submissions, strike when she has the opportunity. And, you know, it's sort of, not to get back to the process thing, but Herrig is a really pretty damn consistent fighter. Like she presses a consistent style. She will go, you know, she will try to be a patient kickboxer when she's at range, when she can push. She does a little more like the guard pulling ground game than I'd like to see from fighters. But she's a really consistent grappler on the ground and aggressive there, and a good grappler and a good scrambler. And Curran is just kind of all over the place. She'll land the occasional hard shot. She'll go for the occasional takedown. She's really at her best striking in the clinch, but she's not amazing there. She's not a controlling force there. She relies too much on her athleticism, and I just don't think that she can press that advantage against somebody as experienced as Herrig. So,
sorry if I'm distracting you by silently laughing over here, but I'm watching this fucking Paige Van Zandt commercial. I'm going to send it to you, and I expect you to watch it.
I've seen it. Now that you explained it, I remember seeing it. I blocked it. And
you have to watch it again while I'm doing my next breakdown.
Okay, I'll watch it while you're doing your next breakdown. On that note, this fight is dead even in the odds. Herrig is a slight underdog, plus 100 to minus 115. Curran, the slight favorite, minus 106 to minus 120. Bet on Herrig. Like, I don't.
Yeah.
I in a toss-up, I really don't see. Like, you're betting on Curran to basically pull a submission out in a scramble. Because other than that, like, this is a woman that got beat by Alex Chambers. And Alex Chambers is about as underwhelming as, like, the smallest, most like weirdly one-dimensional, not great athletic talent in that division.
Yeah, or you're betting on her to have made a drastic improvement. And while I occasionally pick fights on that metric, I don't bet on that. Like, I'm not going to rely on someone making an improvement that I can't have possibly seen coming to win a fight. Yeah. I think that's what she would have to do to beat Herrig. I will say Herrig does have a thing. It's actually irrelevant because Herrig has a thing where she fades. I think that's been her big problem. I think like two of her losses are split decisions, or 2 of her decision wins. She's got a few splits on her record, and then lot of all 6 of the losses are decisions. So she tends to kind of drop off late in the fight, but also so it's not like she's somebody who starts slow and gets really strong as the fight goes on to capitalize on that. Like if Herrig's breaking down, Curran probably is too.
Yeah, I mean, you look, she lost her first 2 fights of her career. Since then, her only losses are to Invicta champ Barb Honchak, UFC champ Carla Esparza, top contender Tisha Torres, and Paige Van Zandt. Like, those are her career losses.
Yep.
And those are all pretty supreme athletes who are
going to have a serious technical advantage or a serious athletic advantage or both to beat Felice Herrig. That's basically what that list of names says.
Yep. And Kailin Curran is a decent athlete, but she was getting shit kicked by Emily Kagan for the early part of that fight. Like, it's not like she's this overwhelming powerhouse who just is absolutely a dominant force in the cage off pure athleticism.
Mm-hmm.
So I really think that Herrig's consistency will get her a win here. And it's weird. Like, I think the odds are really like, I don't like Felice Herrig skewed.
Yeah, basically. I did not expect an even line there. That is kind of strange.
And that brings us to Francis Ngannou versus Bojan Mihajlović. Or Mihajlović.
Well, Ngannou is going to blow Bojan Mihajlović up. That's almost certainly going to happen.
That's right. I'm supposed to be watching a video right now. I forgot.
That's right, you are. We're supposed to make a goat sacrifice to the heavyweight gods to correctly evaluate this fight. I haven't made one, but if Bojan Mihajlović wins, I will. Zane is pantomiming Paige Van Zandt over here. He is accurately. I hate you right now, so you are accurately reflecting Paige Van Zandt's bubbly personality. Artificial bubbly, like it came out of a goddamn soda stream. So Bojan Mihajlović, he throws one shot at a time. He's not a super big heavyweight. I mean, he's
small.
Yeah, he's short. He's broad, but Ngannou's a big dude for heavyweight and a lean big dude. Like Ngannou's like 245 and a tall guy, and he's built like a Greek statue. Mihajlović tends to beat people up from top position who are not that good. His record of 10-3 really just doesn't say a lot. I think here I actually compiled it. The combined record of his opponents is 63, 74, and 5.
Which, let's be fair, regional heavyweight is a shit show.
Sure.
Like, I'm surprised it's not 10 and 70, frankly. Like,
sure. He also lost to 2 of those guys, I think, before beating them. Or like he lost to one of them. It's just his game is Bojan Mihajlović is a guy who I think he's a Romanian fighter, or is he Serbian?
Serbian, I want to say.
Serbian fighter who basically fights in Serbia. They bring in people for him to beat, and that's it. He's really used to dominating them. Ngannou is the top prospect in the heavyweight division right now. Very athletic, very powerful. He's got shocking knockout power, good combination punching, and is making rapid overnight improvements in the way that French MMA fighters seem to be doing nowadays, like Taylor Lapillus suddenly coming in and out wrestling somebody and defending himself beautifully in the clinch and knocking them out. That's how Ngannou looked That's the kind of change he made between his debut against Henrique and his last fight against Curtis Blades. I think we both pick Curtis Blades to beat him?
I think so.
Because we're like, oh, we got a wrestler who has an explosive double leg, is very athletic, and as big as Ngannou, and Ngannou got taken down by Luis Henrique. So, and then he just didn't get taken down by Curtis Blades, and when he did, he was right back to his feet. It wasn't even so much, I think, that his wrestling was much better, it's that he was not content to stay on his back. His fight IQ upgraded from one fight to the next, and so he's on a phenom path right now as a heavyweight prospect. This is another win for him to experience. It's basically what it is.
Basically, too, he's fighting the guy that they brought in for him to crush before Mihajlović got injured, or Mihajlović got injured.
Oh, was he the original guy before Blades?
Yeah.
Why would they replace Mihajlović with Blades if their goal was to have him fight someone like Mihajlović?
Everybody was asking that question when Blades got signed. Literally, everyone was like, what? Why would you, if you wanted him to crush somebody, then why bring in Blades? I mean, he beat Blades and it was amazing, but
yeah,
it
was risky, but he ended up looking very impressive.
Yeah. Mihajlović, I mean, okay, somebody got mad at me once for saying this, so I'm gonna couch this. There are some talented fighters that go fight in Serbia. They have some long-term promotions, and they bring in some Chechens and some Russians and some people like that. But the Serbian fighters developing out of Serbian gyms are not internationally competitive. Pretty much. They're just not there yet. And even more importantly than that, Mihajlović is running his own gym. He is his own head coach. And he runs a long time early adapter gym in Serbia as somebody who went and learned Vale Tudo back in the early 2000s in Brazil and then came back to Serbia and was like, all right, I'm going to start teaching some MMA.
He looks like a random European guy that would have gotten brought in at Pride 6.
Yeah.
Just like a random early Pride heavyweight. That's what he looks like as a fighter.
I mean, his first fight is 2003,
That makes perfect sense.
And yeah, he's 5'11". He is not in the best shape of any heavyweight I've seen, and he's beat a lot of guys just kind of by luck and being the tougher dude.
He also kicked a dude in the ribs while standing after being stopped in one of his regional fights, which was kind of upsetting. So I'd kind of like to see Ngannou knock him out.
Yeah, he's got a little of that edge, the Vagabov edge.
He's like a Bob Schreiber type character, like Dirty Bob Schreiber. This guy's maybe a little too, I don't know. He trains MMA because he likes beating people up more than anything.
And against Ngannou, it would have to be this. It was set up perfectly. A non-wrestler who likes to brawl and likes to brawl in tight. Mihajlović isn't some long-range sniper who's gonna leap in and knock somebody out with this well-timed, well-placed overhand. He's a dude who will rush in behind a couple strikes, press you up against the fence, and just get into this leaning war of toughness and attrition. And it's just perfectly made for Ngannou to absolutely demolish someone. So unless we get serious weirdness here, this is supposed to be a major showcase of Ngannou's talent.
That being said, what are the odds, Zane? Because I believe they're probably too wide for heavyweight.
The odds are -600 to -715 for Francis Ngannou, 714 for Francis Ngannou. Bojan Mihajlović is plus 530 to plus 390. I get it. This is a setup fight. This is a showcase. I do not like to see heavyweights ever skewing over plus or minus 200 if they're not super amazing champs. I could see this being more like 300s as like, but heavyweight is fucking weird. Like it's too weird for major odds. This should be an absolute cakewalk for Ngannou. But I mean, at minus 600, is it worth betting on? No, not really. No.
Nope.
Let's see if potentially Ngannou wins by TKO KO is minus 230. So even that is not getting a ton of value, and it's heavyweight. And if dudes get tough or tired, you never know who's not getting knocked out when you're going for that random 3-round decision that nobody thought was going to happen.
Yeah, I like that. I would even say that was an okay bet if we knew something about Mihajlović in a competitive fight, but we really don't.
Yeah. So it's just, this should be a complete setup KO win for Ngannou. I absolutely expect him to dominate, but don't bet on heavyweight fights, people. Just don't do it. Don't make them part of your parlay. Don't wrap them with anything. Don't bet on them cold. Just don't. That brings us to our main event, Holly Holm versus Valentina Shevchenko. Now,
we have Edson Barboza, Gil Melendez first. Right?
Oh, God, that's right. We have Edson Barboza versus Gilbert Melendez. All right, I'll lead this. Basically, I don't know how much I trust Gilbert Melendez right now. Like I have learned to trust Edson Barboza a hell of a lot, because it seems like Barboza is slowly getting better at. Well, he's getting better at what he was always good at, which is making it harder to find out what he's bad at. I think essentially, like, it's still like, okay, pressure him with boxing, try to out wrestle him, get him on the ground, and just overwhelm him. But his movement has gotten better. His combination striking, his combination boxing has gotten better and cleaner. His defense has gotten better. And his takedown defense and his scrambling and grappling have gotten better. So it's much harder to pick out how to actually pressure him. Gilbert Melendez on the flip side, there's a small chance that he may just look like a somewhat diminished fighter off this drug test. He's put a shitload of wear and tear on his body. He's been fighting since 2002. If whatever he was taking was kind of holding him together, we could see a suddenly less durable, less, I don't even want to say powerful, because it's not like Gilbert Melendez was a powerhouse, but less potent, offensively potent Melendez. There's a chance of that.
He's always had respectable power, but not like a one-shot KO guy.
Exactly. I don't, in general, it doesn't seem like coming off PED tests. Like everybody was like, oh, we're going to see a less, powerful, dynamic Hector Lombard post PEDs. We didn't really. He's looked mostly the same. He's just fighting tough competition.
He maybe gets tired more easily, or he's less durable, or maybe,
Maybe, yeah. So those things, the tiredness is probably one of the key reasons I'm not picking Melendez. It's hard to say like, oh, he gets tired off that altitude fight against Eddie Alvarez, because it was in Mexico City and people were puking on that card. You can't really, yeah. But there's a question, like, will he have a good first round and then just start to fade? Because Edson Barboza won't fade. Edson Barboza is not going to skip a beat. And other than that, Melendez is going back and watching his last couple fights, and especially like early in that Alvarez fight, but his fight against Pettis too, like he really has gotten by late in his career off good timing. Like the striking in the division around him has increased dramatically. And what makes Gilbert Melendez still so potent is that he works behind a good jab first and foremost, which so few fighters do. And then he really picks his spots and when to throw his right hand. And he picks them really well. I don't know, like, that may still be enough to get him by. Like, that may be enough to plant one on Barboza and just kind of steer the fight down a different path to kind of scare Barboza off. But Barboza's just become so much better at working through eating bad shots. Like, getting hit by Tony Ferguson, getting, hit by Paul Felder or Michael Johnson.
Anthony Pettis.
And Anthony Pettis, and just working straight through it, not letting it phase him. And as his striking's become sharper, and like his speed behind that striking is such a potent asset. Like, he can really steer a fight when his opponent can't throw his rhythm off. And Melendez's sort of like throw 2 or 3 strikes and then get you up against the fence for some cage wrestling. It might be able to do that task, but I just don't trust it. I don't trust it here. I don't trust Melendez coming off this break. I don't trust him coming off the drug test failure, and I don't trust him to put together enough volume to do that. Like Edson Barboza, as he doesn't have his problems are not as deep and unsolved as Anthony Pettis is. Even if they're like the similar style to beat, and he doesn't have the knockout power that Pettis had that was able to steer that Melendez fight eventually, Barboza's done so much more to solve that problem. Mm-hmm. He moves so much more consistently at range. Like, his footwork is much more consistent and much cleaner. His output is much more consistent and much cleaner, and he doesn't get caught up in that game to the extent that he did. And I think he can outmaneuver Melendez and keep Melendez from planting him against the fence and landing hard clinch shots and doing the kind of things that have overwhelmed Barboza in the past. So I'm picking Barboza here by decision, but I expect him to look really good.
Yeah, I don't actually have a lot of trouble picking this fight for Barboza. To me, this actually feels like a fairly easy win for him. I'll say right now, I don't think I would even pick 2010's Gilbert Melendez over this version of Edson Barboza. I think Barboza has arrived, and I think you put him in there in a full-sized octagon against Tony Ferguson, he'd have a good chance of winning. Better than he did the first time. And even when he didn't win, he looked really solid against Ferguson. And like, who can match the kind of ridiculous pace and durability that Ferguson has, and the weird unpredictability of his style and his finishing ability as well? Who knows? I thought he looked amazing against Paul Felder. I thought he looked really good against Michael Johnson, who put a ton of pressure on him in a way that Gilbert Melendez really can't. Yeah. Part of the reason Gil fell when he fought Anthony Pettis is that he can't keep up that intense of a pressure game well enough to be a pressure fighter. You know what I mean? He pressures in spurts or he stalks. That's mostly what Melendez does. Mm-hmm. Mostly a stalker. He's like a boxer puncher. He'll slug it out with you. He's got a little bit of dog in him, but he doesn't he's not Rafael dos Anjos. And that's the kind of pressure fighter I think it would take to beat Edson Barboza right now. That or Tony Ferguson, someone who keeps a crazy pace, someone who's very physically overpowering, someone who's big and strong and dangerous and durable and can do it for longer than Barboza can do it. Because there are many points in that fight where it was like Barboza might be winning this fight because he was landing tons of really great clean shots on Tony Ferguson.
Yep.
And I don't know, man. I don't trust Gilbert Melendez to be anything like his old self anymore. That's the problem. He's really kind of been on a slight but steady decline since his final Strikeforce fight with Josh Thompson, where he got hurt really badly in the 4th round of that fight and had to kind of slug it out to survive. And then he came into the UFC and he put on a good performance against one of the less impressive versions of Ben Henderson I've seen, but still lost a narrow decision. He got tagged by Diego Sanchez. How many other people right now are getting hurt by Diego Sanchez? Not many. And then hurt and then submitted by Anthony Pettis. And then a really lackluster fight with Eddie Alvarez. So it's just like it's difficult to look at Gilbert Melendez's record in the last 3 years and then factor in his PED suspension and say he's going to be the same guy he was in 2012 or in 2011. It's even more difficult to say he's going to be better than that. And I think he would have to be better than that to beat this version of Edson Barboza.
Yeah, I think there are two reasons that I felt a bit more halting perhaps than I should. First is that it just feels really weird to like discount Gilbert Melendez.
Sure. Well, because for like 5 years, Gilbert Melendez was, this guy gets into the UFC, he's lightweight champion. And he could have been back then. But it feels like he's kind of outdated now, unfortunately.
It does. Like his game is really a old and simple game. He has, he works behind the jab. He'll change up his strike entries. He'll throw a left hook. He'll throw an uppercut, some things like that. But otherwise, it's, jab, 1-2. Here's a hook. Here's an uppercut. Okay, I threw 3 strikes in a row, so now I have to clinch and go for a single or a double up against the fence. I'm just going to press really hard here for a while. If I don't get it, we'll reset. I'll throw some clinch strikes. And we'll start over again. And if I do get it, then, he gets into a pretty decent wrestling and grappling game. But it's not the same striking game that people are playing anymore. Like the game at the elite levels, especially at lightweight, has really evolved.
He may have a bit more success than Anthony Pettis because he's actually got decent boxing fundamentals. But then again, it may be like hitting pads for Edson Barboza. If it's like 1, 2, 3 coming his way, I don't have any doubt in my mind that current Edson Barboza has any difficulty in defending and countering that combination. And that's pretty much Gilbert's game.
The other reason that I have a little reservation is Eddie Alvarez versus RDA, and Alvarez being like, just like this whole thing about dudes who've been around forever at lightweight, just finding random sudden late career success and winning fights and big fights I don't expect.
MMA in general has been like a miracle comeback sport for the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of that in this for me because Barboza is beatable. It's not like Barboza cannot be beaten. He has been beaten consistently on and off throughout his rise to the elite.
Mm-hmm.
So it feels a little weird to just be like, no, Barboza absolutely comes out and just dominates this fight against a fighter who has been at the championship level for most of his career and who has been amazingly tough to beat. But yeah, the style is right. Melendez does not have he really has to have the right opponent to pressure the way he would need to win this fight, and Barboza is not that right opponent anymore.
It feels kind of like a flashback to pre-Pettis Barboza. Where it's like, all right, I feel like I have to pick Anthony Pettis, and I felt like I was taking a big risk picking Barboza in that fight.
Yeah.
Now that he's actually beaten Anthony Pettis, who I think is quite possibly still closer to his prime than Gilbert Melendez is now,
yeah, could be.
Then I don't have nearly as many doubts about making the same kind of pick. I'm now confident that Edson Barboza is not just the guy who loses every time he steps up. That was a factor of facing very tough competition.
Oh yeah,
but also a factor of being a developing fighter who now seems to have really sorted out a lot of the problems that caused many of those losses.
I mean, by all means, Edson Barboza should be just over the past couple years now in the prime of his career.
Yeah,
this is a dude who started in 2009. He's 30 now, so he's been fighting for just coming up on 7 years. And for the past year or, basically since Felder forward, I expect to see the best of Barboza until, for another 2 or 3 years. And then
this is his prime, and he definitely looked like prime Edson Barboza against Anthony Pettis.
Yeah. So I'm going to pick that against Melendez too. I feel confident that Barboza should beat Melendez. It's just this whole lightweight, this whole MMA, elite level MMA thing has really got me second guessing myself lately because we've seen some fights that just absolutely did not look like I would have expected at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I also do not think that Melendez is nearly the tape study that Eddie Alvarez is, just for a note on that Alvarez win over RDA. Like, I know Alvarez all the time that he's on the sidelines is studying his next opponent. Like, Alvarez is a dude who watches his own fights over and over again and his opponents over and over again in a way that most fighters don't. So
yeah, do you wonder at this point is like Gilbert Melendez, like in that Eddie Alvarez fight, just doesn't really have much passion left for MMA?
well, I mean, especially coming off a drug test, like I kind of got to think at this point, he's got to be thinking like, man, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
You know, like there's a little sense of that too. And it definitely seems like he seems like kind of in that Eddie Wineland phase where after every fight, he's kind of like, I might be done soon.
Maybe Eddie Alvarez was in the same place though, because he wasn't that impressive in the Melendez fight either. He wasn't that impressive against Pettis, and maybe it just takes the right fight for these guys to kind of become fight obsessed again. I think it took RDA for Eddie Alvarez to be like, I'm back with Mark Henry. I'm really taking this seriously. I'm going to knock this motherfucker out. Maybe Edson Barboza is that guy for Gilbert Melendez. Who can say? I hate having to count out Gilbert Melendez because I'm a big fan and have been for years. But, you know.
That's just the way it goes. The odds on this fight, Gilbert Melendez is the underdog, plus 191 to plus 160. Barboza, the favorite, minus 190 to minus 235. Those odds might be a little short, just because Melendez, especially because Melendez is not a great finisher. Just, you know, he does not tend to knock out or submit people. He has a KO over Tetsuya Kawajiri, Mitsuhiro Ishida, Rodrigo Dam, Gabe Lemley, and then, you know, you're going back to like Rumble on the Rock, WEC day, Shudo days, and he doesn't submit people either. Frankly, he in fact has never submitted an opponent. So when you take that into account,
he has a punch submission.
Yeah, he has a submission via punches, which is a TKO. Let's be real.
Yeah.
He has no submissions. He rarely knocks people out. He does not carry a lot of one-punch knockout power. And at that point, it's reasonable to say, well, then does he win a volume-based, control-based decision over Edson Barboza? Probably not. And if those are your options, it's a little hard to see Melendez down at like 160 in this fight. You know?
Yeah.
But he's got the name value that a lot of people trust. A lot of people really, you know, like I say, even I have trouble, like, I don't want to pick against him. So I can see why the odds are as close as they are, but there might be a little something to grab onto there.
I think there's value in that. I mean, I feel quite confident that Barboza is going to win.
Yeah, exactly. And that brings us to the main event, Holly Holm, Valentina Shevchenko. And this is you.
If you read the article that I put out today, you know my opinion on this fight, which is that I think it's going to be really dull. I think that is the most important thing to take away from this. I really get the sense that Sean Shelby thought this would be an exciting fight. Somebody in the comments of the article said this is like Anderson Silva, Uriah Hall, where it's like, oh, we put these two incredible, exciting strikers. Chances are that fight would have been very boring. It would have probably been a staring match where Anderson was taunting Uriah and Uriah had too much respect for Anderson to do anything about it. And this is the same kind of situation, I think. My suspicion is that they're like, oh, the two best strikers at women's bantamweight, or two of the best at the very least.
It's the same kind of thing, except without the one-stop KO finishing ability of either Anderson Silva or Uriah Hall. They could turn that fight on a dime.
It's that without the tension. So it's like an actual chess match, like going to a chess tournament and spectating on a chess match. That's what it'll be like. If you're into chess, there's something to be taken away from it, but I think it's really going to be a lot of staring and a lot of feinting and very little of action. which is okay. Those are fights. I think it's still a very meaningful fight. Divisionally, this one makes total sense. Holly Holm beats Valentina Shevchenko, who lost a fairly competitive fight to the current champion. She's right back in the title picture. I'm sure the UFC be happy for that because she's still got a little shine for being the first woman to beat Ronda Rousey. And Shevchenko beat Sarah Kaufman on short notice, put on a pretty good losing effort against Amanda Nunes. She beats Holly Holm, who beat Ronda Rousey. She's right in the title picture and could very well get a title shot. So it makes sense. Two of the best strikers in the division. I just don't think it's going to be a back and forth war like they probably are hoping it will be. And the reason for that is the styles at stake. Holly Holm, lots of volume, not super accurate, especially considering she's fighting mostly non-strikers. Valentina Shevchenko will actually be the first good kickboxer Holly Holm has faced in her MMA career. The first woman with a striking background. And that's an interesting dynamic here, but it probably means we're going to see Holly Holm landing less than she usually does because she's not that eager to engage in exchanges. And she kind of throws the same combinations over and over and over. Left hook, right uppercut, left hook, and then exits and throws a kick. Left straight, left kick, jab, 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 side kick, stuff like that. Just kind of cycling through the way that Winklejohn fighters often do. Carlos Condit has a bit of the same thing going in his game where it's like, all right, set up for the combination and let it go. I call those rote strikers on heavy hands, people who kind of have in their head, this is the combination I hit on the pads in training. This is the combination I'm going to execute. They have the whole thing ready before they let it go, and they let the whole thing go before they're done striking. That's Holly Holm. I think that's probably the reason why she's not as accurate as you kind of think she would be as a former professional boxer, that she just kind of lets the strikes go. But that is part of what makes her dangerous as an MMA fighter. Is her kick is her most powerful weapon, her left head kick, and that is what follows up the hands. So if you worry about Holly Holm's hands, the kick catches you while you're backing up, and it hurts. And if you're Ronda Rousey and you're ridiculously, recklessly aggressive, you run into the straight lefts, you add power to what is on its own not a very powerful punch. Holly Holm's mechanics just don't lend themselves to impact. Valentina Shevchenko, on the other hand, is a pure counter striker. She does not like to lead. She had so much trouble going after Amanda Nunes in the third round of their fight, despite the fact that Nunes was absolutely done, as Amanda Nunes tends to be in the third rounds of her fights. She was dead tired. Shevchenko had to have known that she needed that round to win. And even though she did beat Amanda Nunes up, she really couldn't press the action. She wasn't really stringing her shots together. She couldn't get aggressive and pressure Nunes and break her. She was picking her shots still. She was being cautious. She was being a counter fighter and having trouble being the first to throw. So in this fight, it's going to be Holly Holm not engaging that much and Valentina Shevchenko not leading. And so that makes it probably a pretty slow fight, but it also makes it a fight where every little thing that happens is probably going to have a lot of impact on the scoring. It's probably going to matter a lot. And I think that gives the edge to Valentina Shevchenko. I think Shevchenko has considerably more pop on her shots than Holly Holm. She's not a power puncher by any stretch of the imagination, but when Shevchenko lands a kick to the body or when Shevchenko lands that right hook that she throws over and over, it looks like a punch connecting. And oftentimes Holly Holm is kind of pushing her shots and just nudging you at the end of her reach and not really sitting down on her blows. And I think the fact that Shevchenko is a counter fighter, that's the tough thing. Shevchenko's not going to be able to steal rounds from Holly Holm. She's going to need Holly Holm to be Holly Holm to win. If Holly Holm makes some adjustments, I think Shevchenko might have a hard time catching up. But Holly Holm's roteness, the predictability of her striking, I think that gives openings for Shevchenko. I think that gives her chances to find the chinks in Holly Holm's armor while she's attacking without being so susceptible to the follow-ups as previous fighters, because, again, Valentina Shevchenko is a very experienced kickboxer. She has been kickboxing for a long time, and she doesn't have to worry about the takedowns of Holly Holm, so she might be able to unleash that a little bit more than she has in other fights. And then something somebody pointed out in some BE comments not long ago, Valentina Shevchenko's camp is not Jackson Winklejohn. That's obviously a big thing, but her main training partner is her sister, who is a southpaw kickboxer, who is Holly Holm's size. And she is a Muay Thai champion like Shevchenko herself was. So it's not like she's going to come in and have no idea how to deal with what Holly Holm presents. I think it's going to be a really close fight. I think Shevchenko may hit a takedown or two and not be able to control Holm. I think Holm's going to win some rounds. I think it'll be like a Shevchenko split decision, 48-47 times 2. That's what I think I see from this fight.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree. I think it's going to be a very slow fight. That's kind of, I picked Miesha Tate to beat Holly Holm for exactly that reason, because people were like, "Oh, Holly Holm, she destroyed Ronda Rousey. She'll destroy Miesha Tate." Like, no, you've been watching other Holly Holm fights, right?
Isn't that the crazy thing, right? Holly Holm comes in the UFC, and I'm all busy being like, guys. Holly Holm may have been a professional boxer, but she's not going to be this destructive force. Then she isn't until the only fight where it matters. And in destroying Ronda Rousey, she reconvinces everyone that she's like this dynamite counterpuncher, when really she just had a completely unforeseen opportunity to look amazing against a fighter who was not ready for her.
Yeah. Yet, I'm picking Holm in this one of the reasons you said is that Holm really likes to keep people out on the end of her strikes. And she's got the height and reach advantage here, and she'll put out the volume. And I feel like she can just kind of keep Shevchenko out at range, and Shevchenko is not going to be willing to pull the trigger often enough to turn that into winning rounds. The other part of that is that then I think when they get in the clinch, like Shevchenko, the thing I will say for her is that, even as fights get late, she's very consistent about her clinch work, and like she keeps a very consistent pace late. So does Holm, but we saw it like in the Miesha Tate fight, as the fight went on, Holm's ability to stuff shots, well, it decreased tragically for her, the big one she gave up late. But the thing, like, I don't think that, there's a chance to me that Shevchenko could start to press her clinch game to more effect late in the fight, basically, if Holm gets tired. But they don't really put out enough offense for either of them to get tired.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think that Holm is the more powerful. I think she might be too strong for Shevchenko in the clinch. I think she might just be too big for Shevchenko to muscle around there. And so much of Shevchenko's offensive success tends to come when she can chain together her range striking into clinch striking.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she really
Muay Thai style dumps and like these tricky junior throws in the clinch.
She really has to have both elements working. And I feel like if she gets stuck at range too much and then cannot get that clinch game going, she's going to end up on the end of a lot of weak, really sort of unsubstantial Holly Holm offense for a decision loss. I might be wrong about that.
No, I totally see either happening. Pat and I did this on Heavy Hands. We did a punch counter punch, and both of us are like, I think I saw Pat's point of view more than he saw mine, because I think the gut instinct is to pick Holly Holm. But either way, like, it's a weird fight. Like what you pointed out, neither of them even get tired, so like they're not even bad enough for this fight to get interesting and dramatically competitive. It's like they're both just even in this way. And Holly Holm throws a lot more, but the percentages are vastly different. Holly Holm has, I don't think she's gotten over like a 40% striking percentage in any UFC fight other than the Ronda Rousey one. Shevchenko's percentage for both of her UFC fights is like 72% or something, or like 50-something percent. It's something very, very high. She's very efficient. When she throws, she tends to land. When Holly Holm throws, a lot of times she's not even trying to land. And other times when she is, it's like she's not in position to do so. I think that's opportunities for Shevchenko, But also, if Shevchenko's like, I'm going to wait for the right one to pull the trigger on, and Holm isn't committing or overextending, which she doesn't really do, then nothing happens. I don't think Holm's going to have an easy time hitting Shevchenko, and I don't think Shevchenko is going to be countering a lot. So I really think it's going to be like 5 strikes per round landed for both women in several of these several frames in this fight.
Yeah, I like the idea of Shevchenko winning. So I hope that that's true. Like, I don't dislike either woman, but I like the idea of Shevchenko winning just for the hell of it, something new. But I love the chaos, and I unfortunately I guess I also like the idea of Holm winning, because I think the last thing that Dana White wants to do is have Holm fight Rousey again, because he doesn't want Rousey to retire.
Well, Rousey, I don't think she's going to fight Holm.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. Like, they don't want to get backed into that corner of Holm keeping on winning. And so I would kind of like to see Holm keep winning to back them in that corner.
So that they have to. So Ronda has to admit that she doesn't want to fight Holly Holm again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, either way, I agree. It's going to be a razor close, ugly, boring points contest that I do not expect fireworks. I do not expect drama. The only thing I expect is like a 45-46 or 48-49 decision across, and probably split. I'm leaning Holm for her size advantage and the ability to keep Shevchenko maybe outside and out of the clinch. But if Shevchenko can get inside and get the clinch at all and make that work for her, I could easily see her landing the better shots throughout the fight.
It's yet another kind of clinch game for Holm to deal with too. It's a little different. Yeah. Rocky Pennington had some success striking Holm in the clinch.
Mm-hmm.
She hasn't really faced any other clinch strikers, and she hasn't faced someone who specializes in clinch takedowns the way Shevchenko does. She was very well prepared for Ronda Rousey's specific bag of tricks.
Yep.
She was not quite so well prepared for Miesha Tate, but Miesha Tate adapts really well. I think she'll probably be fairly well prepared for Shevchenko, but once again, it's kind of an unknown how Holly Holm deals with that clinch game. She is very strong, though. Like, that's the thing. Holly Holm is, in all of her fights, she has looked very powerful in the clinch. She's got a big frame. She's muscular. She's well-trained. So it won't be easy for Shevchenko to dominate her there, but at the very least, the fact that Shevchenko is a good clinch fighter and a pretty good takedown artist, it gives her flexibility.
I realize the aggression and power dynamics are different, but Shevchenko in the early stages of that Amanda Nunes fight, it really seemed like just like that size and power differential was like a major factor for her not wanting to commit to anything at all, or to really, like, she really had trouble dealing with being on the end of Amanda Nunes' reach.
But a lot of it too had to be feeling Nunes' power on the ground, though.
Yeah.
Like Shevchenko's ground game.
It's a whole different dynamic. It's a different dynamic, but
it's a weird fight. I'm somehow more interested in it now, just because it's 5 rounds and I don't know what Shevchenko looks like in that kind of fight. Yeah. I'm interested in seeing what is almost certain to be a very ugly fight, just because the implications of the outcomes and the weird. It's like watching Jake Shields versus Tyron Woodley, and knowing that like Jake Shields winning a fight by just like bapping a guy with nothing punches or knees that don't even move Tyron Woodley's leg in the clinch.
I remember the 3rd round of that fight. Just be like, you are going to lose this fucking fight to Jake Shields in the dumbest way possible.
Yeah, and I won't be here next week, which is a shame, because I was gonna pick Tyron Woodley over Robbie Lawler. That would have been a fun discussion to have.
It would have been. All right. On that note, that sad, depressing note, let's close out the odds. Shevchenko is the underdog, plus 225 to plus 190, or to plus 185, or no, plus 180. What am I? I'm just all over the fucking place here. Plus 225, plus 180. Holly Holm, the favorite, minus 214 to minus 278. That feels really wide to me. Holm has never, in any other fight other than her Marion Renault fight, and we have seen the kind of problems Marion Renault has pretty plainly spelled out since then. Holm has never looked nearly that dominant in the UFC otherwise. Her Pennington fight was a nip-tuck split decision. The Rousey KO was obviously her big shining moment, and the Miesha Tate fight, like, she was on her way to winning, but it was still a close, ugly fight. It was no, like...
She was on her way to a draw if Miesha Tate had only won that round
True.
Had won the round, because Miesha Tate got a 10-8 in round 2.
Yeah, she was on her way to a draw in the Miesha Tate fight. So, Holm, like, they said, banking on Holm at minus 200 odds is just like, she's really not showing that kind of dominance.
Yeah, after having said that this isn't a bettable card, I kind of feel like there are actually a lot of things here. I think now that I look at it closely, it is kind of, it's the hypeless card where, like, Valentina Shevchenko is not getting the credit she deserves.
Yeah.
Edson Barboza is not really getting the credit he deserves. Felice Herrig not getting the credit she deserves. Frankie Saenz. It's a lot of those where it's like name value, slight name value, not enough for people to really research the person, versus no name value but pretty solid fighter.
Yeah,
and a lot of
Elkins at minus 181 to me. Like, I don't really see Elkins losing to Godofredo Pepe. I mean, it could happen, but
there are a few here that are worth thinking about.
Yeah, just skip the heavyweight fights. I realize that Ngannou feels like a tantalizing anchor for your
parlay,
whatever it is, run. I can't remember the words now.
Parlay.
Yeah, I feel like I can see that Ngannou as a tantalizing anchor for your parlay, but are you really gonna anchor a parlay on a heavyweight bout?
Don't do it. Be wiser than that. Don't do it. Learn from your mistakes.
And otherwise, yeah, it's an interesting card. Like I say, it's not. I'm actually looking forward to this card. Like, there's stuff on it that I think it'll be weird, and when it's not weird, it should be fun.
And then the perfect way to make up for Fox pacing is go on YouTube and watch Racing for Pizza with Paige Van Zandt just over and over between every fight, because it's way better than all the other commercials they're going to show you.
On Twitter at TheZaneTime, and you can find Connor on Twitter at BoxingBush. That's BUSCH. You can find both of us over at BloodyElbow.com. That's DOTCOM over on YouTube. That's a YouTube channel. Give us a like, subscribe, follow, all that good shit, and we will be back. Well, I will be back next week with somebody, not this man, somebody else, and to talk about the next UFC card. I'm actually going to be back right after this to talk about this Bellator card coming up. So plenty to do, plenty to watch.
Don't sound so excited, Zane.
Got other shit to do. All right.